So Sri Sanatana Siksha continues. After hearing about Sambandha Abhideya Prayojan Tattvas from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sanatana Goswami has inquired about Mahaprabhu's explanations of the Atmarama verse to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Mahaprabhu says that he was a madman. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was another one. And so he accepted his words as truth, but he can't remember how he explained it to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So he says, but due to your association, maybe some new wonderful explanations can come. And so I will try to explain it, empowered by your Sangha. That's what he told Sanatana Goswami. And then he begins to explain the verse. So the verse we probably should know. Atma Ramash Chamunayo Nigranta Apyo Rukrame Karvantya Haitukyam Bhaktim Itam Bhutagano Hari. So he breaks down each of the word meanings. What is the meaning of Atma Arama? What is the meaning of Munayo, Nigranta, Urukrame, Kurvanti, Ahaitukam, Bhaktam, Itamputa, Guna, Hari, Cha, Api. That's what we heard yesterday. So the breakdown of the different meanings of each individual word, then he will combine these meanings to give his explanation. But before he does so, he wants to give the essential purport of all that he's about to explain, the essential purport or the essential meaning of the Atmarama verse. Mahaprabhu first gives that. So in the passages 71 through 106, he's giving basically a synopsis or the essential meaning of the particular of this verse and how he's going to expound upon it. So that's what we'll try to cover today. So let's see. So he begins. So he takes the first meaning. Brahma Shabdhera Artha Tattva Sarva Brihatama Swarupa Aishwarya Kari Nahi Yanrasama. So the word Brahma indicates the Samam Bhonam, the absolute truth, which is greater than all other truths, Sarva Brihatama. So the word Brahma indicates that Tattva, which is Sarva Brihatama. It is Brihatama. It is, the word Brihat means great, basically. So Brihatama, the superlative greatness. Sarva, of all great things, this is in the superlative category. Swarupa Aishwarya Kari Nahi Yana Sama. It is the original identity, and there can be nothing equal to that absolute truth. So basically, we had heard that the word Atma and Atmarama, the word, one of the 7 meanings of the word Atma given was Brahma, a reference to the absolute reality or Tattva. So the word Atma Arama means one whose pleasure is derived from the Brahma, from the absolute reality. That is the meaning of one of the meanings of the word Atmarama. One whose happiness or pleasure is derived from the absolute reality. So that's what he's describing here. He quotes one verse from Vishnu Purana as a pramana for this understanding of the word Brahma. Brihatva brahmatnatvacha ta Brahma paramam vidu tasmai namas te sarvatman yogi chintya vikaravat. So I offer my respectful obeisances to the absolute truth, the Samambhonam. He is the all-pervasive, all-increasing subject matter for the great yogis. He is changeless, and he is the soul of all. Okay. So the proper meaning of the word Brahma is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Say Brahma Shabde Kahe Swayam Bhagavan. So Mahaprabhu wants to say, because Brahma refers to that tattva that is superior to all great tattvas, right? Tattva sarva brihatama. So Mahaprabhu wants to say, so that Brahma actually refers to Swayam Bhagavan, because that's what he is taught to Sanatana Goswami in the Sambandha Tattva section of Sanatana Siksha. So he says that reality that is greater than all other realities is actually Swayam Bhagavan. That is the real meaning of the word Brahma, Swayam Bhagavan. That's what he wants to say here. Advitiya Gyan Yaham Vina Nahi An. He is the Advitiya Gyan. He is one who, that Swayam Bhagavan is one without a second, and without whom nothing else exists, right? Advitiya Gyan means the non-dual consciousness, outside of which there is nothing, because there is nothing outside this category. That is the meaning of non-dual. Nothing, there is no reality that is different from it. So it could be the competitor of that reality, right? Prabhupada has translated Advitiya again as one without a second. Means because this one is an infinite category, so all other categories exist inside this one category. He is the support of all other categories. So Yaham Vina Nahi An, without which there is nothing else. So another word for this is Ashraya, which means the ground of all existence or the ground of all being. So just like there's no ground you cannot walk on, so without the ground of this conscious entity, then there could be no other existence. There would be no foundation for any other type of existence. So that is the meaning of this Brahma. This is the real meaning of the Brahma, according to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That reality, that tattva, which is Sarva Brihatama, is known as Swayam Bhagavan. He is Advitiya Gyan, and he is the Ashraya, without which nothing else can exist. So Atmarama then means one who is deriving their pleasure ultimately from Swayam Bhagavan, Krishna, who is the Advitiya Gyan. That is the meaning of the word Atmarama. So, of course, he quotes this particular verse, Vedanti tat tatavidas tattam yajganam advayam. So, the knowers of the reality, Tattvavida, they say that that Tattva is Advaya Gyan, non-dual consciousness. And Shabdite, that reality is referred to as Brahma Iti, Paramatma Iti, Bhagavan Iti. So that reality is referred to as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So, because Mahaprabhu has just said that Brahman is Swayam Bhagavan, and he says that Brahman is also Aditya again. So he's quoting this verse as a pramana for that particular idea. We'll come back to this verse because Mahaprabhu is going to quote it again. So we'll just take it here as a pramana for what Mahaprabhu is saying. So next verse. So say Advaya Tattva Krishna Swayam Bhagavan Tina Kale Satya Tinho Shastra Praman. So that absolute truth, that Dvaya Tattva, the absolute truth without a second is Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So again, this Mahaprabhu, of course, is explaining the Vedanti Tat verse that he just quoted. And it's just doubling down on what he's already said. So that Advaya Tattva or Advitiya Gyan, same thing, is Krishna, who is Swayam Bhagavan. Krishna is that Swayam Bhagavan. He's already said that the real meaning of the word Brahma is Swayam Bhagavan. And that Swayam Bhagavan is Sri Krishna. So Tina Kale Satya, he is the Satya, he is the truth. And Tina Kale, in the three phases of time, past, present, and future. And this is according to Shastra Praman. This is according to all the verdicts of the scriptures. He is the supreme truth in the past, present, and future. That is the evidence of all scriptures. So those words, Satya, truth, and basic Vedantic theology, something is called a Satya or truly abiding when it exists in all the phases of time. And that which does not exist in all the phases of time is called as Asat. And that is the difference between Sat and Asat. Of course, these words Sat and Sat, they have different uses, and we'll see that also in this explanation. But here, that is the distinction between Sat and Asat, that the Satya, that which is truly abiding, or truth, with a capital T, exists in all the phases of time. And normally we get occupied with the Asat, things which don't exist in all phases of time. And in that way, we become bewildered. So Krishna is that Satya. So that is the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam also, right? Satyam Param Dhimahi. Srila Vyasadeva is writing, and he's saying, let us meditate on the Satya, the Param Satya, the absolute truth. So who is that Satya? That Satya is Krishna, Swayam Bhagavan. And this is what Shastra Praman is indicating. Okay, simple enough. So he quotes this verse from Bhagavatam. This is an important verse. This verse is from Chatu Shloki Bhagavatam. So Chatu Shloki Bhagavatam, you know, basically there are 7 verses there, 2 introductory verses, then the 4 Chatu Shloki verses, and then a closing out verse. So 7 verses altogether. And the first verse, Krishna says he wants to teach 4 subject matters: Jnana, Vijnana, Rahasya, Tadanga. So these are the 4 topics he wants to teach. So Jnana refers to knowledge about Bhagavan. The word Vijnana essentially refers to that which restricts awareness of that Bhagavan. It refers basically to Maya. That is the constricting boundary of the consciousness of the jiva, by which he is suffering due to the absence of awareness of Bhagavan. So that is called as Vijnana. So you also need to know how to cross that. This word I've been liking these days, liminality. The word liminality means threshold. And like Carl Jungian sort of depth psychology, the liminality refers to like a period of hardship that needs to be crossed in order to encounter or be integrated into a greater reality. You know, so you can take it as like psychology, but in the spiritual sense, it is also having some meaning there. The liminality here, or the threshold to be crossed, is Maya, which is the cause of the a beginningless cause, of course, of the non-awareness of Bhagavan. So that is Vijnana. And then Rahasya means the secret. So that secret essentially, anyway, in short, the secret is Prem Bhakti. And Tad Anga means a component part of that secret. So the component part of that secret is Sadhana Bhakti, which leads to Prema. So these are the 4 topics of Chatushloki. So this is the first verse when Krishna is introducing the subject matter. He says, I'm going to teach these 4 topics. And then he says, by his grace, then one can understand him, Yavan Aham, in his utter completion, Yata Bhava, as he is in his true existence. And one can have Tattva Vigyan, like direct perception, Anubhava, Paresha Anubhava, of that reality by his mercy. Replete, then he goes on to say, replete with Yarupa Guna Karmaka, replete with form, qualities, and activities. So Krishna is already telling that what he wants to reveal to Brahma consists of knowledge of himself and his full completion. And as he is in his true existence, replete with form, qualities, and attributes. So there's no question of the Chatushloki being about the impersonal Brahman, as the Mayavadis try to argue. And all of our acharyas make a lot of commentary around that. Okay, so then after having introduced the subject matter, then he wants to unpack the subject matter, or the topics of each of the topics of the Chatushloki, one after the other. So the first topic is Jnana. So here in this verse is appearing, Ahame vasam evagre, nanya yat sarasat param pashtara ham yari taschat, yo avashishe tasosmyaham. So this is a verse about Jnana, knowledge about Krishna. So what does he say here? Prior to the cosmic creation, only I existed. Aham eva, asam eva agre. Only I exist, and no phenomena exists, either gross, subtle, or primordial. Na anya yasara saparam. After creation, only I exist in everything. And after annihilation, only I remain. So just going back, the reason Mahaprabhu is using this verse is that he wants to say that the Advaya Tattva, which is, Swayam Bhagavan Shri Krishna, he is the absolute truth that exists in all phases of time, right? Tina Kale Satya. So in order to explain this Tina Kale Satya idea, Mahaprabhu is quoting this verse because essentially this is Krishna speaking to Brahma. And he is saying that in this particular verse of Chaturshloki, he's saying that before the creation, that it is he only that certainly existed. And he certainly was not existing. I don't know if I said that right. Asam evagre. So he uses the word eva, which is like a definitive. He had positive existence, and there was no question of his non-existence. So that I obviously isn't impersonal, because something without attributes cannot be referred to by a personal pronoun. Acharyas make some comment like this. So this I is a entity. This I is an entity with form, etc. And Krishna's already mentioned that he's talking about himself replete with form, qualities, and activities. So he existed in the past. Na anya yasara satparam. And certainly there was no other that existed, rather sat asat. So, or that which is beyond the two. So this word sat asat, the word sat here means the effect. Well, it's taken in different ways. So the word sat means effect, and the word asat means cause, and the word param means beyond them both. So some acharyas take the word to refer to the material world. So sat means the effect refers to like the various material elements, and asat refers to their subtle causes, and the word param refers to pradhan. I think that's how Sridhar Swami takes it in his commentary. Or the word sat asat param can refer to also Brahman. So there was no other, either sat, asat, or that which is beyond both, Brahman. Because that Brahman is also non-different from I. I, Krishna, is understood by certain people with certain adhikara as impersonal Brahman, but it is I only that is understood as impersonal Brahman. It is not some other entity. So in this way, only I existed prior to the creation. And then after the annihilation of the creation, it is I that only continues to exist in the spiritual world. So this I means also with his retinue, his spiritual retinue or internal energy. All the acharyas give this example, just like when it says the king is coming. So that means the king and all his retinue, or if you say the president is coming, that means the president with all his followers, they're all coming together. So this I is also with means, the Vaikuntha Lokas and his associates, and that is all included in I. So they all existed before creation. And after the annihilation of the creation, they continue to exist. And even during the creation, he is also there in the form of the material elements, because these are effects and he is the cause. And the relationship between cause and effect is non-different. Just like you only get peanut, what is that? You get peanut oil from peanuts, right? So they have an intimate relation, you can say. The peanut oil is the effect, it causes the peanut. So the effects in the form of the various phenomena that we encounter in the material world, these are an effect whose ultimate cause is also Krishna through his Maya Shakti. So he is existing that time also. So this verse is quoted to say that reality is existing in all phases of time, because that's what Mahaprabhu has just said. That Advaya Tattva is Krishna, he is Swayam Bhagavan, and he exists in all the phases of time. And what pramana you have for that? So then he quotes this verse to show that. Okay, simple enough. This verse actually has a lot of commentary to it. I was actually looking at it, but just to try to explain all of the details there is not really the purpose of this particular class. But one could go back and look at that. It's very, Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam. This is the essential Bhagavatam, a few shlokas. Okay, so after saying this, he says, Atma Shabde Kahe Krishna Brihatva Swarupa Sarva Vyapaka Sarva Sakshi Paramaswarupa. So the word Atma indicates the highest truth, Krishna. That's what he's just been trying to demonstrate. He is the Brihatva Swarup. He is the greatest of all, and he has a Swarup, he has a form. He is the all-pervasive witness of all, Sarva Vyapaka and Sarva Shakshi, and he is the supreme form. Okay, Paramaswarup. All right, having said that, he moves on. Oh, there's some shloka here, so pramana. Atatatwach cha martritwad atma hi paramohari. So Hari, the personality of Godhead, is the all-pervasive original source of everything. He is therefore the super soul of everything. Okay. So there are three ways to attain the lotus feet of the absolute truth, Krishna. There is a process of philosophical speculation, the practice of mystic yoga, and the execution of devotional service. Each of these has its different characteristics. So he's just said that the Brahma is the absolute truth known as Krishna, Swayam Bhagavan, Advitiya Gyan, Advaya Tattva, etc., etc. So how do you attain? And so therefore, Atma Rama means one who is deriving pleasure from that absolute truth, Krishna. So he says, say Krishna prapti hetu. So there are three causes, hetu, by which there can be Krishna prapti, which means, achieving or attaining that Krishna. Trividha sadhana, there are three sadhanas, which cause the attainment of that Krishna. What are the three sadhanas? Gyan sadhana, yoga sadhana, bhakti sadhana. These are the three sadhanas by which Krishna prapti, by which attainment of that Brahma, that Krishna, can be had. Tinera pritak laksham. So they have different characteristics. So then he quotes, okay. So Tine Sarana Bhagavan, Tina Sarupa Bhashe, Brahma Paramatma Bhagavata Trividha Prakashe. So the absolute truth is the same. But according to the process by which one understands him, he appears in three forms as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Tina Sadhane, so by these three sadhanas, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality, is realized. Tina Swarupa, but he appears differently. Tina Swarupa Bhase. So only Bhagavan is obtained, but he appears differently as Brahma, Paramatma, or Bhagavat, Trivida Prakashe. These are the three manifestations. So according to the process you take, he appears differently. And then, of course, he quotes this verse in that context naturally. Vedanti tatavidas. Again, same verse. Tatam yajganam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdite. So he wants to quote this verse to acknowledge that this advaya gyan, this ultimate reality, has 3 degrees of completion, you can say. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. They're like 3 degrees of completion. And Shabdite. So the word Shabdite means that this reality is referred to as Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. So in other words, it's not that the reality is different. It is only that one reality, Advaya Gyan, but that one reality is referred to by these 3 nomenclatures, Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan, according to the means or sadhana used to commune with that reality. That's the idea. So not only does this verse indicate 3 degrees of completion of the reality, you can say, but 3 degrees of completion and surrender, right? Because Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Yayata mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamiyaham, that yata, in accordance with the nature of your approach and surrender to me, then I respond accordingly or reciprocate accordingly. Right? So that word yata is the most important word in that verse in a sense, because yata means in accordance with the nature of your approach, right? That is the meaning of the word yata. So reality is responsive. Reality is responsive with the nature of one's approach to the reality. So if you approach Krishna by one method, you realize him in a particular, you can say, form or way. And you approach him by another method, you get another realization. And these realizations indicate the the yeah, the degree of completion of realization of the absolute truth indicates a degree of completion in your surrender to that reality. So it's not all one. One doesn't, although one is realizing the same reality, there are degrees of completion in that realization. You know, you can think of it, I've been using this a lot more. I think it's a good analogy. But if you imagine reality, tattva, the Advaya tattva is like a huge circle. And inside this huge circle are other circles. So like concentric circles are there, right? So the outermost circle in this concentric circle model is the Advaya tattva or the Ashraya, the shelter for all the other circles, which are interior to it. And you can take that outermost circle to be as Bhagavan, right? Then the next circle down, you can put it as Paramatma. And another circle within, you can put it as Brahman. And then you put another circle, and that is the Maya, you can say, the liminality to be crossed. And then inside of that Mayic boundary circle, the Jiva is inside there. So the Jiva has to cross beyond that liminality. He has to cross beyond that threshold of Maya through sadhana. So some Jivas take the sadhana of Gyan marg. So by the Gyan marg, they come to the concentric circle that's just next to it. If they take yoga marg, they can come to the circle that is above that Brahman line, so to speak, Paramatma realization. And then by bhakti sadhana, they can reach the ultimate circle, right? The circle that is encompassing all the other ones. Anyway, it's a little bit of a creative example. It is my own, so it's not perfect, but I think it gives some sort of visual. So here, there are 3 degrees of completion of the reality, and there are also 3 degrees of completion of surrender. And so according to your sadhana, everyone is realizing that same reality, but according to the method, according to the method of their surrender, then they're getting it different. They're referring to that reality in different ways, and they're getting access to different degrees of reality. So ultimately, there's no beef. Just like there's this one, I don't know where this purport is. I think it might be Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 2, maybe. I think it might be there. It's the first time where Krishna speaks. So it says Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. So Prabhupada's purport is about what is the meaning of this word Bhagavan. And so he explains it. Actually, I don't know if it's this purport. Maybe it's in the first canto, first chapter. Anyway, so there Prabhupada wants to explain that the impersonalists and the personalists, they kind of like beef with each other. They have bad feelings. They all the time criticizing each other. But actually, they're talking about the same reality. But they have access to different realizations because of the method they use to approach reality. Okay, so that's the idea here. So this Brahma Atma Shabda Yadi Krishna Re Kahaya Rudhi Vritte Nirvishesha Antaryamikai. So he says, although the word Brahma and Atma indicate Krishna, their direct meaning refers only to the impersonal Brahma and the super soul respectively. So he's already talked about the real meaning of this word Brahma, right? The great. It means Krishna, Swayam Bhagavan, Advaya Tattva. But these words, they have conventional ways in which they're understood. And there's like the etymological ways in which they're understood, then a combination of both. So etymological understanding is called the yoga vritti, and the conventional understanding called rudhi vritti. So you see this word rudhi vritti. So although the word Brahma and Atma refer ultimately to Swayam Bhagavan, conventionally speaking, people don't understand those words to mean the Swayam Bhagavan, Krishna. they take it to being the impersonal Brahman or the Paramatma respectively. When people study Shastra or like Upanishads or any Shastra, rather, they see the word Brahma, that refers to impersonal Brahman, and they see the word Atma, then it refers to the individual soul or to the Paramatma generally. So that's what he's saying here by the Ruti Vritti. People understand these words in that particular way. So then he explains this. Gyan Marg Nirvishes Brahma Prakashe Yog Marge Ataryami Swarupate Bhase. So if one follows the path of Gyan Marg, the absolute truth manifests himself as impersonal Brahman, Nirvishesha Brahman. And if one follows the Yog Marg, he manifests himself as the super soul. So that's the degree in which you can understand reality. If you want to enter into the outermost circle, so to speak, then Rag Bhakti Vidhi Bhakti Hai Dhui Rup Swayam Bhagavatve Prakash Dhui Rupa. So Bhakti has two divisions, sadhana, because we're talking about three sadhanas that give the revelation of reality in these three degrees of completion. So with Bhakti, there are two types of sadhanas, Rag Bhakti and Vidhi Bhakti. Rag Bhakti means Raganuga Bhakti, and Vidhi Bhakti means Vaidhi Bhakti. So these are the two types of Bhakti sadhanas, Hai Dui Rup. So by Rag Bhakti, Swayam Bhagavatve, you can realize Swayam Bhagavan Krishna. And by Vidhi Bhakti, you can realize Bhagavatve means Bhagavate Prakash, some expansion form of Krishna, not Swayam Bhagavan Krishna. So Dvi Rupa, these are the two kinds of manifestations of that Bhagavat Tattva that can be realized according to the type of Bhakti sadhana that you take. So by executing spontaneous devotional service in Vrindavan, one attains the original supreme personality of Godhead, Krishna. Simple. Rag Bhakti Braja Swayam Bhagavani Pai. Okay. Oh, very nice verse. Nayam Sukapo Bhagavan, Dehinam Gopika Sutta. Garinam Chatma Bhutanam Yata Bhakti Matamiha. The Supreme Personality of God, Krishna, the Son of Mother Jasoda, is accessible to those devotees engaged in spontaneous loving service, but he is not as easily accessible to mental speculators, to those striving for self-realization by severe austerities and penances, or to those who consider the body the same as the self. Yes. So this verse comes at the end of the Damodar Lila. And it's a glorification. The context in which it appears is a glorification of Mother Jasoda's bhakti. Then Shukadeva Goswami wants to comment about that, saying that this is a type of bhakti by which Swayam Bhagavan Krishna can be captured. So what type of bhakti is that? That bhakti is Rag Bhakti. That's why it's being quoted in this particular context. So there are those who do Gyan Marg, they do Yoga Marg, or they do sense gratification. So there's no question of realizing Bhagavan. But even if you do Vidhi Bhakti, you cannot realize Bhagavan in this particular form of Swayam Bhagavan Krishna. So for that, you need Rag Bhakti. So that's why he's quoting this verse here. I actually forgot this verse was in the sequence. I was wanting to look up all the commentaries of this verse, but I didn't get a chance to do so. So I have to do it. I'll have to double back next time. Nice verse. Okay, so now he says the other idea, by executing regular devotional service, Vidhi Bhakti, one becomes an associate of Narayana and attains the Vaikuntha Lokas, the spiritual planets in the spiritual sky. And he quotes a nice shloka. This comes from 3rd Canto, chapter 15. Very nice chapter. That chapter is describing the Kumaras arriving to the gates of Vaikuntha. And then a nice description of Vaikuntha is given. And then a few verses are described who can enter into Vaikuntha. First, they describe who cannot enter Vaikuntha, which is such a nice verse, 3:15:23, very nice verse. And then after that, they describe who can enter into Vaikuntha. So this verse is given here in that context. Who is qualified to enter into Vaikuntha? So I'm just going to read the English here. Those who discuss the activities of Lord Krishna are on the highest platform of devotional service. And they evince the symptoms of tears in the eyes and bodily jubilation. That means rati has come. Such persons discharge devotional service to Krishna without practicing the rules and regulations of the mystic yoga system. They possess all spiritual qualities, and they are elevated to the Vaikuntha planets which exist above us. Give me a second here. I want to look up this particular verse from, because I have a sense someone's going to ask about this, and I should have looked it up earlier, but 3:15. I just want to look up the, here we are, comment. So 3:15:25. Okay, let me share my screen. Here. Okay. So let's look at this commentary. Oh, Prabhupada gives a long one too. So now those who are qualified to describe, I'm reading Sri Vishwanath's commentary. So those who, by following the Lord, best among the Devatas, are far beyond rules, or who discard the process of Ashtanga Yoga, are superior to us because their position is destined by us, but cannot be attained by us. Another version has Dureham. This means that discard the ego. What is their characteristic? The proof of their character is described. Because of experience of taste, through talking with mutual affection about the Lord, they show ecstatic symptoms. In Puranas and other scriptures, one sometimes hears that there is some momentary appearance of demons in the spiritual world, but this should not be considered actually interest into the spiritual world, since they lack realization of spiritual happiness. Sometimes tigers or bears enter into the jewel-covered palace of the king, endowed with various fragrances. For amusement, the king desires that the populace see those animals. Similarly, the Supreme Lord, for fun, by his will, brings material objects, ferocious demons, saintly persons like Brigu, or persons beyond the three gunas, such as the Kumaras of Vaikuntha. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know this comment was here. To show to them the inhabitants of the spiritual world, and then quickly takes them away as is suitable to his purpose. But he brings his pure devotees to Vaikuntha through his associates on airplanes and has them reside there eternally. He has them taste his sweet abode, sweet service, and sweet pastimes. Okay, so I read this for the first part. Anyway, because Prabhupada's translation from the CC is about, says Krishna. So I just wanted to see, someone's going to ask that. Well, it says here they worship Krishna. Why are they going to Vaikuntha? Anyway, so the idea here is by Vidhi Bhakti, you go to Vaikuntha. By Rag Bhakti, you go to Braja. That's the idea here. Okay, last sort of flow of verses here. So the devotees are divided into three categories. Actually, I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions. So these devotees, say Upasaka, I'm actually unclear if this is referring, the say Upasaka means those devotees, referring to the ones we just heard about, those devotees who practice Vidhi Bhakti, are in three categories here: desire, without desires, with desire for liberation, and with material desires. So my sense is that this is referring to those with qualified by Vidhi Bhakti. He wants to talk about them. I don't think this refers to the Rag Bhaktas. I would have to double check that. I'm actually not 100% sure. But before we go into that, maybe I'll not go into it today even, because we have another 12 verses. So it's kind of a lot. So maybe we'll stop there and let's see if any question is there, and then we can maybe continue if this doesn't take a lot of time.
Hare Krishna, JJP, Dandavat Pranams. I have a lot of questions. I guess going back, rewinding through that order. As a quick comment, it's interesting that purport said that Vishnu, I guess, or Krishna will bring material objects to Vaikuntha just for them to see the spiritual world. And I guess automatically I thought of Durvasa Muni with Ambarish Maharaj. Durvasa Muni isn't a pure devotee, yet he was able to go to Vaikuntha to beg help and shelter from Vishnu. Would you say that's a good example? Or I know there was, there's
Sure.
debate. Okay. So you would say that's a good example. It's not that he went to like Vaikuntha or like Vrindavan in like the material world or somewhere in the material world, like the hot mountain. It is actually that he went to the spiritual world and Vishnu allowed him in.
Sure. I mean, there are Vaikuntha planets in the material world also, right? Like
Yes.
Shritadweep. So he could have went there also. But either way, he would need entrance, right? So that's what Sri Vishnu was passing some comment like that. It's interesting. I never recall. I've definitely read this purport many times, but it didn't stick out until just now. So it's just an interesting thing.
Thank you. So just on the three aspects of realization, it's interesting that you said it's the degree of surrender.
Yeah.
So those who
That's what
follow,
Krishna says, right? Ye yata mam prapadyante. So the word prapadyante means surrender.
yeah, so it's just interesting because I wonder if those who are, say, following the Gyan Yoga or each of these different yoga processes know that it's actually because they are realizing Bhagavan is just one, it's non-dual, but it's a degree of surrender. So those who are attracted to Gyan mean that they want to surrender less. They don't have that full, I don't know if it's like Sharanagati is the right. Oh no, it was a different word. But or that they know that it actually requires a lesser degree of surrender.
I don't know that necessarily. Surrender means if you have to follow any path, you have to be dedicated to it, right? Otherwise, there's no question of following it. Not only have to be dedicated to the path, but you have to be dedicated to the goal of the path also, isn't it? Otherwise, not possible. And there's a nice verse there, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So Sri Rupa Goswami is describing why bhakti is rare, right? Sudurlabha. He described me 6 characteristics, and one of the characteristics is Sudurlabha is very rare. So Sri Rupa Goswami says it is rare for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is that this rarity is referring to Bhav Bhakti specifically. So it's rare that anyone attains Bhav Bhakti for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is that you have to develop a Sakti within Sadhana Bhakti, because Bhav Bhakti only comes after a Sakti in the stage of Sadhana. And even that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is even if you develop a Sakti, then Krishna does not give Bhav immediately until your Asakti becomes very profound. So for this reason, Rupa Goswami is giving 2. So then he offers some shlokas to describe these 2 types of rarity. And in the first shloka, anyway, I'm paraphrasing because I could pull it up. Take me a minute. He's saying that Gyanis and yogis, after thousands, I forget how he words it. I need to, now I'm tempted to pull it up, look for it. Give me a second. I know where I can find it easily in my little workbook. The heck, this one. I'll just read it's very nice shloka. It's a good shloka. Oh, no, this is a PPT. I don't want that one. This one. Okay, share my screen. Okay. Padme Cha. Okay, I'll share my screen. So he calls this particular verse. It's a nice verse. I should learn it actually. Because it's yes. No, not that one. Where's the other one? This one. So Surah Durlabha. Yeah, this verse. It is this one. So Gyanata Sulabha Muktir Bhuktir Yaknadi Punyataha Seyam Sarana Sahasray Hari Bhakti Sudurlabha. Then you can see it here. So it says liberation is easily attained by Gyan, and material enjoyment is easily attained by punyas, such as sacrifice. After attaining dedication to those goals by thousands of attempts. So Gyanata Sulabha Mukti. So Mukti is Sulabha, easily attained by Gyan. And Bhukti is Sulabha, easily attained by the punyas, like yagyas and so on. Seyam Sarana Sahasraya, after they develop dedication to those goals by thousands of practices. Seyam Sarana Sahasraya. So the idea is that mukti and bhukti aren't easily attained until you develop dedication to those goals. And to develop attachment or dedication to those goals requires, thousands of attempts, different practices. Anyway, that's the first half of the verse, and then it's the second half of the verse, which applies to bhakti. So the idea here is that in order to attain reality, right, mukti, Brahman realization, you want to attain reality, so you have to be dedicated to that. And then dedication to that goal and dedication to the path that will allow you to realize that goal. So that is the meaning of prapadyante, surrender here. Otherwise, how you will attain it? So not necessarily like this is, they're not thinking like, well, this is lesser surrender, this is more surrender. They're thinking this is my goal, mukti of some type or realization of this reality or that. And you need to be dedicated to that. Otherwise, how you'll attain? So all of these paths require shraddha and dedication in order for you to, first of all, deal with all the difficulties of the path itself and dedication to the goal of those paths. Well, that is the idea here.
Thank you. This is just a comment. This feels like the Bhav Bhakti is almost impossible. And it could be very disheartening. It's almost
Why
like
impossible?
If you read, the Lord cannot be, so by Bhav Bhakti to the Lord cannot be attained if one practices thousands of different sadhanas. Because
that means here in this context, it means that you should do only bhakti. Right. So that is where Rupa Goswami has already said this thing when he says, Gyana Karmadi Anavritam. So not that you should combine bhakti with this sadhana, that sadhana, this thing and that thing and the other. And no, you can develop a sakti and bhakti by bhakti alone, not by any other practices. So that's how you can come up to the level of a sakti. That's what he wants to say.
Thank you for clarifying. I'm like, there's no chance this. Okay. Thank you. It's just by sadhana cannot be attained. It really is all through mercy. And in one sense, is it proper then to say, and that we hear this a lot, that bhakti is actually, even though it's the fullest degree of surrender, it's the easiest process because it's the one that obviously requires the most mercy, but really we all the paths have their own endeavors, but Krishna really lends his hand in bhakti. Of course, to get out of the material, you need bhakti and mercy, but they always say Gyan and Dhyan Yoga, it's by your own endeavors to get there, whereas bhakti, it's really Krishna's mercy. So is it a fair statement to say that bhakti is actually the easiest process, even though it requires the most surrender?
From an angle, and from another angle, it's very difficult. And 7.3 Bhagavad Gita, you can see Prabhupada giving some purport that people say bhakti is easy and it's for people who can't do Gyan and Yoga Marg. So, okay, like women and children, all right, you do bhakti because this other paths are too hard for you. But Prabhupada said, if it is really easy, why take the more difficult path? And then he says, because it's not easy. Precisely because of the degree of surrender that's required. So from a different angle, it's very easy. Like Krishna says, susukam kartamavayam. And from another angle, it's very difficult. So it depends on how you're trying to speak to your audience that day, which one you're going to emphasize.
Thank you for that clarification. And this is just clarifying my understanding. Here, the purports are the verses delineated. Gyan, kind of like mental speculation, is one process, the Gyan marg, and the mystic yoga is to realize Paramatma. But technically, once if you take mystic yoga and you realize the Paramatma realization, from there it's like a fork in the road. You have to decide if you want to merge. Okay, that's correct. So there's really only two quote-unquote destinations, which is the impersonal Brahman, or you go personal into Vaikuntha. So yes. Okay, so it is okay. So they have to decide from there. And then I just want to make sure this explanation is correct as it came up in Srimad Bhagavatam class. And I thought I was repeating an answer that I heard, but I want to make sure it's complete. And I know you'll probably have something to add, or your confirmation is a good stamp of approval. But the question is always, how do the Brahman and Paramatma realizations are also covered in the Bhagavan realization? And my understanding is that
How are they what? Covered or included?
yes, for example, how but they say so Brahman realization and Paramatma realization is also like covered within Bhagavan realization. Like if you realize Bhagavan, then you realize Paramatma and the impersonal Brahman realization. Is the explanation that, for example, when you reach Brahman realization, you realize you're Sat, you're eternal, you're not this body, you're spirit soul, kind of like Brahma Bhuta, which is also covered when you realize Bhagavan realization. And then for Paramatma realization, you realize, yes, a mystic yogi can see Vishnu or whatever form in the heart, but it's really, I think in the 6th chapter, seeing Vishnu in the heart, of realizing, kind of fully understanding that Vishnu is in the heart of every living entity. So you treat a Brahmana, a cow, dog, and dog eater all equally. And again, if you realize Bhagavan, then that realization is also covered. So that's the explanation of how when you realize Bhagavan, then Paramatma realization and as impersonal Brahman realization are like automatically like encompassed in that.
Yeah, that's one way of explaining it. That also is a nice explanation.
Is there another explanation to it? Or
there are unlimited explanations. Why only one? Why only two? Why only three? There are unlimited ways of explaining things. See, when you have to explain something that is as abstract as realizing the absolute truth, whatever language we use at best will be like an approximation, right? Just try to explain your own experience to one person, huh? How you will do it. So you have to use language, you have to use poetry, you have to use different sort of metaphors or analogies, different images you try to give them. And they'll get some idea of what you're experiencing, but that at best can only be an approximation. They cannot directly understand it until they directly experience exactly what you experienced, the way that you experienced, like as a subject. So there's so many ways to try to explain these things because they're very abstract. So, the acharyas they've given, we would probably argue, or we would be convinced that the way the acharyas have explained it is the best or most precise way of, explaining a subject matter. But really, there's so many ways to explain it. And at best, we'll get an approximation until we kind of break through or across the different thresholds constricting our consciousness. So don't have to be so attached to one way of explaining. Of course, you can say there are certain things that are like clearly wrong ways of explaining things. But when it comes to right ways of explaining things, there are many ways that will come up. People will explain it. So your ways, that was also nice. There would be so many other ways that could be explained.
Thank you so much. And then if we could I was going back kind of through order. So in the very beginning of class, now I forget the verse, but it did come up. Was it the 3 mode? I kind of just wrote down my number 3 modes. Anyways, sorry. It comes up that I want to make sure my understanding is proper. For example, we call Vishnu Tattva, and originally I thought, well, why not? Tattva means truth and Vishnu is all pervading, but why wouldn't it be called Krishna Tattva? Because Krishna is the
call it Krishna Tattva also, no problem.
Yes, okay. And originally I thought, well, because Vishnu comes from Balaram and Balaram comes from Krishna, like expansions. But that Vishnu coming from Balaram, that's Mahavishnu. Is that correct in relation to
all Vishnus?
Oh, well, but then can you really say Vishnu is the same as Krishna?
Why not? Everything is the same as Krishna. He is the reality that encompasses everything.
It's okay, but you would say it's on the same level. Like when you say Vishnu Tattva, then you can say Krishna Tattva in that sense.
Vishnu Tattva means category of God. So that's what they're talking about. The God category, as opposed to the Shakti category or the Jiva category or the Maya category. And this is the category God. That's what we're talking about, the God category. Then these things pertain to God. That's what it means.
Perfect. Thank you. So given that Vishnu, again, God, there say no delineation, the God category. It's interesting because as we talk about the three modes, and I'm also referring back to our discussion where you clearly delineated, again, you had heard it from like my beginning yoga times, you don't know actually these teachers if they're actually quoting from Shastra, where, for example, Shiva is the destroyer of ignorance, and you clarified, no, he's the destroyer of the material universe, and he's the guna avatar of ignorance. And they probably like put it together. But it's interesting because I think in the making class you said, so Vishnu is the avatar of the mode of goodness. But a couple of things, Vishnu is not, he's transcendental. So
Yeah.
how an avatar of a material, and it's interesting because Maya, her energy and influence in the material world are these three
No,
modes.
so he doesn't contact Maya. Just by proximity, he becomes as guna avatar, Sataguna. But his position is different than Brahma and Shiva in that case.
But isn't it okay? If I could finish, it's my logic and understood. You're saying he never touches it, but to even be an app. So you have Durga, and then her three modes, which is her energy, kind of influencing the material world and the jivas, and then from there you have like the avatars under her. It's kind of like the three modes, and then you have Shiva, who's ignorance, Vishnu is goodness, Brahma is passion. So it feels like they're subordinate to the three modes from Durga. So it doesn't seem, maybe like when I draw kind of like a chart, it feels like Vishnu is below Durga because of the three modes. And even if you say he sits next to her and actually does,
you go and study First Canto, Chapter 2, verse 23. The idea here is very simple, that the material universe has a regulator, and that regulator is the Supreme Lord. So he regulates the universe in different ways. So one way he regulates the universe is through these guna avatars. So that one Supreme Lord assumes the form of three. That's the basic idea here. So the Purusha, who is the regulator of the universe, he assumes the form of three: Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, to regulate the universe. So, and of these three, Vishnu, of course, is transcendent, and therefore the ultimate good can be had by worship of Vishnu. And then he goes to explain a few other points with the Goswami. If you see 1, 2, 23 through, 26, 25, 2 verses, 3 verses, he's explaining. So that is a guna avatar there. It just means that he's regulating the universe in different ways. So in this way, he regulates when he wants to do the Visarga, the secondary creation. So the Vishnu takes on the form, or he empowers a Brahma. When he wants to do the destruction of the universe, then he assumes the form or empowers a Shiva. And when he's maintaining it, he maintains it through his own power as Vishnu, not contacting the Maya, but just by its proximity, it's maintained. So we can also go and see Paramatma Sandarbha section on Guna avatars there. But the basic idea is that he's regulating it, and he has his forms through which he regulates that. So the Guna avatars are considered as such.
If I could say it a different way, and I want to make sure my understanding is proper. At a high level, we say everything is Krishna. It's non-dual. Everything's a manifestation. So when you say he comes down and he has to regulate the material universe, so he expands as Brahma or himself and Shiva, then you would still say, though, like, for example, we're expansions of Krishna. In that sense, we're quote unquote Krishna because we're Shakti. So Brahma is Jiva Tattva, like Shakti Vishnu Avatar. Vishnu is Vishnu Tattva, and then Shiva is Shiva Tattva. So even though you say it is Krishna expanding to regulate the universe, there's different tattvas within that.
Yes. The
Okay.
Guna avatar is one of such category.
And then when you say, for example, Lord Brahma is the Guna avatar of passion, and so on and so forth, like, what does that really mean? Are they you can't say they're the embodiment. Like Lord Brahma on Brahma Loka is like the most sattvic, and he's he's praying and meditation all the time. He's not like the embodiment of passion, or is it that those who are in passion pray to him, but that's not true because Bhagavad Gita, I think 17th chapter talks about if you're in sattva, then
I don't exactly know how they fully intended. I would have to go and review the Guna Avatar section Parama Sundarbha. The basic idea here is Brahma is the creator. Visarga, he does the Visarga, the secondary creation, right? So passion is related to creative force, right? And Shiva is destroying the universe. So that is related to the Tamagun, which is destructive force. And Vishnu is maintaining the universe. That is related to goodness, which is the force that maintains things. So in that way, everything in the universe is going through this cycle, right? Creation, maintenance, and destruction. Creation, maintenance, and destruction. That's how the universe is regulated. Samsara is regulated in this way. Everything in life moves in these three cycles. Relationships, anything, it moves in these three cycles: creation, maintenance, and destruction. So on a macrocosmic level, that is also going on, and there's a personal force behind that. It's not impersonal. So when it comes to the creative force of nature, doing the Visarga, so you have a Brahma, and when it's maintained, there's a personal force behind that. That's a Vishnu, and when there's a destroyer, when it's time for the universe to be destroyed, so there's a personal force behind that also. So that is a Shiva.
Thank you. So it doesn't mean that they're embodiments of, like, Shiva isn't ignorance.
No, not like that exactly. Because then Vishnu will be embodiment of Sattvagun. No, that's not true. So they're not like personified passion or personified ignorance. But their functions in relationship to the universe, creative and destructive or maintenance. So they call this the presiding deity of that force of nature that's dealing with that part, right? Because the creative force is passion. So here's a presiding deity behind that force. The destructive force, here's a presiding deity behind that, is Shiva. Right. So we think in the material world, we're impersonalists, right? So we think all these things are just happening automatically and it's impersonal. So here we're being told that there's a personal force behind all these things. You know, ultimately you can just say simply there's God, but then that God is manifesting other sorts of forms and personhood to deal with these different forces.
Thank you.
What they mean by presiding deity, I always wonder about that. I've even asked different scholars, like, what does presiding deity exactly mean? But I've never so far gotten a clear answer that's impressed upon my psyche. So I don't, this is the best I can do with that right now.
Thank you. Yeah. So, so thank you. They're gunas, they're guna avatars in relation to these modes, in relation to the cosmic material universe. Yes. So in one sense, you would say that's separate from, because my question is, how does Maya or Durga come into play? But it almost seems separate, because you would say these are guna avatars in relation to kind of like the universe creation, maintenance, and destruction. However, Maya, the three modes, kind of passion, ignorance, and goodness, are the influence over the jivas within the universe, separate from like the actual kind of like maintenance, destruction, and creation of the universe. Like, if I had to put in my mind, they're almost like completely separate categories, because Maya, she is in charge of the three modes, but it's like the influence over the objects in the material universe, whereas these guna avatars are like from the creation, like the cycle of the material universe. So it's completely separate. They don't touch, like, because where was Durga and Maya come into play with these three avatars? She doesn't. This is, they're in relation to the cycle of the creation, destruction, maintenance of the universe, and her influence of the three modes are of the objects in the material universe, like the jivas.
I don't know how you're describing it. I don't know if it will be described that way, but there are obviously different categories. So Maya is one category, Luna avatars are another, and by Maya, by her shaktis, the world is being manifest. And then after it's manifest, it's being regulated by the Purusha. And this Purusha takes on these different forms to regulate it. So there's some connection there, but because by her Shakti, she manifests everything, but then it has to be regulated. So it's regulated by the Purusha. And just like in classic traditional culture, the woman is considered the inspiration behind the manifestation of so many objects. That's why she's referred to as Stri also. The word Stri means to expand, right? And then she's regulated by the husband, controlled. Now, of course, nowadays people feel triggered to hear these things, but in the old culture, it was like this. So there's something there. She manifests the world, and then she's regulated by the Purusha. And he comes as guna avatars to regulate these energies.
Thank you. I'll have to let that sit. But with the guna avatars, I just want to check when you said that's why Vishnu and maintenance, I guess, praying to Vishnu or like having Vishnu as your deity, that's the springboard to transcendental because he's the guna avatar sattva. I just want to,
because he's God, he's transcendental, right? So you want to go beyond Maya, you have to pray to something transcendental.
so it's not correct to say that those who are in passion pray to Lord Brahma, those who are in ignorance.
Not necessarily.
Okay. But because you sometimes hear those who are, sorry, I know this would be a choppy subject, but I remember listening to a Wisdom of the Sages, and there's this one like other or listener who said, I know Krishna is the supreme, but somehow I am attracted to Shiva. And this person say it has like a pet snake, and then he too has all these tattoos, whatever it is. And Kaustubha Prabhu's answer is, there's some tamasic, because they might be in the mode of ignorance. Like again, like his choice of pet is a snake. Like it's not like a puppy or like some cute like bunny. It's like a snake, which is a little, and then it's like what takeaway was that if you're kind of in the mode of ignorance, then you're attracted to Shiva, who's the predominant deity of ignorance. But you're saying that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I mean, it's also true, but you can be a passionate person attracted to Shiva because Shiva is the husband of Durga, and you can get material objects from that. So passionate people also get attracted to Shiva.
But some people could, people interested in the mode of goodness could also be attracted to Shiva.
Yeah, it's possible. Generally, though, we hear that people in Sattva, they are into Vishnu worship. But maybe in some cases, they also are attracted to Shiva. Because there are different ways you can worship Shiva also. You can worship him as a guna avatar, who's an expansion of the Purusha, or you can worship him as some, independent entity. So different people will worship in different ways. Even Vaishnavas, we also worship Shiva, right? Vaishnavas also do Shiva worship sometimes on their altar for different reasons. So it depends.
Okay, so I'm just gonna let that go though, that even though they're the good avatars, doesn't mean you're in that mode when you pray to them or that you're presiding deity. That's not necessary.
Because they are also devotees. So that means people and Vaishnavas will also pray to them or worship them. That's possible. So it's not always the case. But you may say in some general case, because Krishna says in the Gita that Yam Yamni Yamam Astaya Pakrita Niyataswaya, that you will choose your deity of worship that is corresponding to your nature. Pakrita Niyataswaya. So in certain modes, you'll be attracted to certain types of deities, or even in the material world, like superstars and so on, which are like deities these days. So there's something to that also. If you're in a certain mode, you'll be attracted in a certain way.
Right. Thank you. Just like Kali worshippers, it's like a certain
they're definitely a mode of ignorance.
Right. Okay. And then the thing that I have to let sit, and I just want to check is the kind of picture that I painted is like incorrect in that it's not separate like Maya and then these three gunas. What you're saying is that they are working. Maya manifests kind of like the material, she's like the material energy in this sense. And she does manifest the three modes. And within that, the three modes do fall under them. So in one sense, it's like these three guna avatars do fall quote unquote under Maya, but yet they are the regulators. And the example is the
I
woman.
don't know what you mean by they fall under Maya. They're called as avatar, right? So their category is not under Maya, but they're regulating the material energy. as we've described, regulating creative potency, destructive potency, maintenance potency. But they're called as avatara. So their category is not under Maya. I don't know what you mean by under Maya.
Okay. Yes, I guess I'm a very visual person, so I have to, like, in my mind there's like flow charts and like things to kind of categorize it, but I understand that that is not a correct representation. I can understand, yes, originally in my mind, if I had to do a visual, then that is that not the more proper is that the three modes, and then kind of the regulators in what somewhat separate, but they're not. And that's kind of like the best explanation. And perhaps the prior flow chart, in one sense, that I kind of painted in my mind is a little more accurate in the description, that they're not under Maya. They regulate, but there's some relationship because they're the regulators and the avatars of the three modes, which come from Maya.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And then avatar, we just established that even though they're avatars, they are not embodiments, but they're just the regulators of those modes in relationship to the cosmic maintenance, destruction, and creation of the material universe.
Yes.
Thank you so much. This was incredible. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay, we'll stop here then. Hari Om Tat Sat. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Haribol.